now we get into some of the fun stuff. I have already outlined to you why I can recognize why the Big Ten and SEC wanting to procure 4 auto bids for the college football playoff in 2026 and beyond is not a good thing. I've shown you that ESPN realizes that that is not a good thing, and that's why they have tried to slow that progress down. So there's, 2 for 2, but predictably it took a beating in the national media cycle again as well. So let's go ahead and make it 3 for 3 here. 3 for 3 on getting beaten around by everybody, because national media, including a former adversary of this channel and Big 12 fans, one key former adversary has weighed in with some pretty good words that I'm going to read to you in a moment. But first, I've got to get to this audio. And if you follow me on Twitter, it's at JL Kurtz in order to do so. You saw this or heard this, I guess, is the more appropriate way to put it. You heard this earlier this week, but I like to listen to the College Football Inquirer podcast with Dan Wetzel, Ross Dellinger, and Pat Forde. And when they were talking about all this, the fact that the SEC and Big Ten are trying to take these 4 automatic bids and make that a thing, Pat Forde went off. And as the kids would say, man, you got to let him cook. Let Pat Forde cook here. So I'm gonna play this for you.
I did it last year.
There we go.
You want to know how I feel about this? I think I said it last year. If anything, I'm only more entrenched that this is terrible. This is further greed. This is unchecked power mongering. There's no leadership. There's no leaders. We don't have any leaders. We have strongmen and grifters. That's all we got. We have strongmen and grifters who are running college athletics. They don't give a damn about the whole. They don't give a damn about any other sports. All they want is more money and more control for the things for the top people. That's what the SEC and the Big Ten want most of all. And the ACC and the Big 12 are willing to go along with it because they're going to get 2 bids out of this. And everybody's scared to death that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to go off and do their own thing, to which, again, I say, dare them. Dare them to do it, because if they really want to go down as the worst people in the history of college sports, that's where they're headed. This is far enough. This is far enough that you are shoving stuff so far down people's throats that nobody is sitting there clamoring to say, God, the playoff was no good. We need more teams and we need more automatic bids for the people that already have all the advantages. Is anybody out there saying that? Then maybe it's the same people that want a 76-team basketball tournament. Where are they? We're going to end up with that. They're going to shove that down our throat too. That's coming. It's great. College athletics is run by wonderful people.
Excellent. Well done, Pat Forde. Now, as you'll notice, the Big 10 or the Big 12 rather and ACC are not totally abstained from the scorn of Pat Forde there, as he says, look, they're just going to go with it because they want the 2 auto bids, which I've said to you, as much as all this sucks, it could be worse. It could be worse than that. So yeah, you're going to go along with it, but it's only because of the position that you've been put in. What other choice do you really have? I guess Forde says the choice is call their bluff, go do your own thing, but then you're expediting a jump to losing a lot of your best players. If you're ready for everybody to hit the portal in the spring to jump to Big Ten and SEC schools, do that jump and not be competing in the same postseason as them like that, So I don't know that there's much of a choice. They've been pinned into this position by the leadership. And the other thing, I love Josh Pate. I think he does an excellent job. I've told you guys that many times. But I did hear him say the other day, if you think it's all Sankey and Petiti and these guys, remember that they work for the presidents and athletic directors in their leagues, and so they're just carrying out the wishes of those guys. Okay, fine. They're clearly still a major part of the problem, even if they're just carrying out the will of whatever those guys want, who they technically work for. You're all a big part of the problem. If Sankey were a real, true leader here, he could say, hey, guys, maybe this is one, you could try and curry favor and maybe we back off of this and listen to ESPN and try and preserve the long-term investment here and think about, 2 or 3 TV contracts from now. And will we still be making as much money, because will there still be as much national interest in the sport? So either way, you're not taking a stand to try and make the right decision for everybody involved, or just the right decision for the sport, not ruining the sport. You're complicit one way or the other. You're either not trying to do that when deep down that's the right thing, or you're just as big a part of the problem as everybody else there in looking at this in such a short-sighted manner. So does not matter to me. Either way you slice it, it's not great. Now, let's turn to Stuart Mandel, right? A lot of people around here have not been big fans of Stuart Mandel. I certainly have had times where I've had my issues, and obviously the Pac-12, Big 12 saga there for a while. It's definitely very testy. 2021 was probably the worst time for that, when he wrote that article, the infamous article about the Hateful Eight's potential TV value, which he was comparing to the AAC at that point in time. But got to give it to Stuart Mandel. I say all that to say he's been a guy that has gravitated more toward like the big brand stuff in the past. But this is what he said about the SEC and Big Ten doing this. Quote, "Well, the 4-bid idea was first discussed a year ago. Behold the arrogance if the SEC pushes it through immediately after landing just 3 bids last season." That is funny. That is funny. Now, they will say, well, look, this will be an expanded 14 or 16. We would have gotten Bama or, whoever. Insert Bama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina in. We would have gotten them in last year if this were expanded. Okay, whatever. The point is, you guys were not a shoe-in to just get all these teams in there and that, it'd be a 5 or 6 bid league. No, it was the worst SEC league that we've seen in like 20 years. So yeah, the timing on that is pretty funny. And I can appreciate that Mandel points that out. He also would go on to say, none of this means college football is indestructible. The single biggest threat to its popularity is the most recent cycle of realignment gone wild, which cost 12 West Coast schools, their natural rivals, exiled 2 to Siberia, and has effectively told every fan base outside the Big Ten and SEC that their school is unimportant. Yeah. Then he says legislating that distinction into the playoff will alienate large swaths of the country. There is an element of that. That's actually a really interesting point from him. Like, we all basically know how the SEC and Big Ten feel about it and how they've treated everybody. But it hasn't been explicitly like written out like this into something that's very consequential. And they've monetized it now, right? They have further monetized it by adding these extra bids. They have further monetized it. There's more finality to it when they do it like this. And he says it's all for something that is completely unnecessary. Also true. It's just for greed. It's for greed. That's it. Yes, you're freaking out because revenue sharing. It's greed, man. You already have so many more advantages over everybody else. It is greed. We've got the Big Ten. One of the stories I didn't talk about a ton on the channel that came out within the last couple of weeks is that Tony Petitti and the Big Ten, they're exploring private equity. Like, okay, you guys need private equity with all the advantages that you already have there. You're going to take the private equity idea from the Big 12, who was doing it because the Big 12 would reasonably need it to stay close to you guys in money. Mandel closed by saying it's not generally a winning formula to alienate 75% of your customers, but the 2 ruling parties are governing for themselves. Yeah. The SEC and Big Ten, he pointed out, only comprise 25% of all FBS schools. So that's where he gets the 75%. Literally 75% of the other schools are who you would be alienating here. And then we got this from Dennis Dodd, too. So Dennis Dodd from CBS jumped in and did a whole piece about how the risk for college football right now is that it turns too much into pro wrestling, where it feels like there are just predetermined outcomes here. He said a college football playoff with auto qualifiers becomes a little less unscripted and a little less credible. Perhaps even the SEC and Big Ten athletic directors who gathered this week to discuss the playoff are unaware of that basic truth. They have been warned of the risk, maybe not directly, but any conference worth its media rights consultant knows the pitfalls. So he's saying anybody that's got media consultants surely has been warned of the long-term risks of this. Again, if ESPN's going to see it and complain about it, yeah, you would certainly think so. Dodd says, I'm not suggesting the outcome of individual games would be known. I'm suggesting that a portion of the field could be known in advance with the AQs. With 4 Big Ten spots locked in, the likes of Iowa could be guaranteed a spot as early as November 1st, a month before the season ends. Nothing against Iowa, but that stinks. More than that, it reeks of pro wrestling. Dodd brings up something here that I'd kind of forgotten about. The SEC and Big Ten last year actually floated the idea of their 2 champions being seeded number 1 and number 2 in the playoff. Those 2 spots would have been assured before the season started. At that point, why even play the season? Yeah, now that is one of the areas where they got enough pushback where they did kind of back down. And you can understand why. Like, okay, we do not need to have you automatically. Just go earn it. For God's sake, go earn it. Please, earn something. People from pull yourself up by your bootstraps land. Earn something. Dodd says, well, there's no evidence such an outlandish demand will emerge this week. There's still a possibility the big dogs could screw this up. The warning signs continue to flash red. The latest championship game featured 2 blue bloods, Notre Dame and Ohio State. It was the 5th least watched championship game since the BCS started in 1998. So bottom 5 rating in the last almost 30 years. Bottom 5 rating, and yet it was 2 blue bloods. Like the type of game that you're hoping to get more and more of with what it is that you're doing. Dodd says, does the annual possibility of 3 Michigan versus Ohio State games improve the ratings? Too much of a good thing is overkill. You know, even that was driving Josh Pate nuts when he was talking about that this year. SEC-based guy, national guy. So look, if you're going to get Ohio State and Michigan playing multiple times per year, that's going to erode at how big the rating is, how much we care about when it does actually happen. And that's another one of those long-term things. If you're going to do a Super League with just Big Ten and SEC, those games will get old hat. You know, if that's what's happening year in, year out all the time, people will get a little bit tired of seeing those games. It will become more ho-hum mundane, whereas right now seems more exciting. You got to think about the long-term stuff, man. Remember Fruit Stripe gum? Maybe I'm just a child of the 90s. Fruit Stripe gum. It was awesome. You'd get it and pop it in, and it was like the greatest tasting thing ever for about 90 seconds. And then it lost all its flavor, and it was like, oh, okay. There's some of that at play here if you're going to do Ohio State, Michigan multiple times. Just to drive the wrestling point home here, for now, the SEC and Big Ten have become quite the tag team. Let's hope all of it doesn't develop into WrestleMania. Okay, I've got some super chats to get to. I'm going to get to those in just a moment. But I do want to make this point. And Ron, I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Ron. Ron is a Georgia fan, and Ron says Georgia's 53-5 the last 4 years, best in college football. They've earned it. Well, I think what a large part of what I am saying here is that for Georgia, okay, you can feel like they've earned it now, but it will be a bad business decision for Georgia long term if you push too far right now and you alienate enough of the country. It may be good for 5 years, it may be good for 10 years, but then after that, if it becomes so niche that it's only the fan bases of 25 schools, and sure, some national appeal as well, but you've lost 75% of your audience there because they're just disenchanted by this, and you're cutting them out of too much, well, then those TV contracts for Georgia are going to become less valuable. It will not be as valuable of an entity, and it will, one, become, therefore, like kind of less exciting for you, but also financially just less viable. And so like that's the problem here and why a lot of this feels very short-sighted. And that's what ESPN and, well, I don't know about Fox, at least ESPN has been reported because Dodd reported it too in his story. ESPN is saying like, guys, chill a little bit here. Chill. I like Tim. I'm an Ohio State fan and I do not like how this is going. I appreciate that a lot, Tim. I appreciate somebody who's a fan of a big brand that's like, because if you are Ohio State, I can imagine if I were an Ohio State fan right now, and Starter 179 and Eddie, I'm getting to you in just a moment. If I were an Ohio State fan right now, I'd be like, guys, like we just won the national title. We can go buy a roster. We're fine. Our conference is getting so much more money. We're going to be at the top of the sport. We're still a great brand. Like what we don't need this. This is excess. This is too much greed. Like I've got the mansion. I don't need an extra room full of cash to swim around in like Scrooge McDuck. I can survive just with the mansion and having an open 7th bedroom. Like, that's okay. I don't need it to be filled with cash so that I can go take a gratuitous swim in the cash every day. That may not be the best play here. So that's kind of the point.